Hello and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. As you can tell by the title, we have a guest today, a guest author, Tony Frost. And Tony, we love to start our podcast by checking in. How's your week been so far?
Excellent, Danette. I live in Sydney and I live in Manly. I'm working in my office in the city. I come across Sydney Harbour each day and it's a great place to live and work.
I love Manly. It's such a gorgeous place. How beautiful. So welcome to our podcast, and we love to start by learning a little bit about you. So could you share a little bit with our viewers about yourself and your journey to where we are today?
Sure, thanks, Danette. So I had a first career as a tax lawyer and chartered accountant. I started in 1984. I started at Pricewaterhouse and was there for a few years. I went in-house. I went to work at Westpac for 5 years, went back to Pricewaterhouse, became a tax partner at Pricewaterhouse, and then left 10 years before the scandal. So you may know that PwC Tax had a shocking scandal a couple of years ago. I left in 2003, so 10 years before that debacle. I went to the tax arm of the law firm Freehills and ended up running Greenwoods and Herbert Smith Freehills for the last 7 years of my first career. And my big end of town tax, I used to do work for companies like Macquarie and BHP. Anyway, at the end of 2018, I decided I want to keep working, but I got sick of filling in time sheets in 6-minute intervals. And so I went back to university. I did a Master of Science in Coaching Psychology. And now I have a second career as an executive coach, mentor, leadership consultant. I love teaching. I teach in the MBA program at the AGSM at New South Wales Uni. I teach the company directors course for the AICD. And I have 3 directorships. I'm on the board of my old school, St Augustine's. I'm the non-executive chairman of leading Australian Valuation Group Leadenhall, and I'm also on the board of the Redfern Legal Centre.
That is so awesome. And I worked at Arthur Andersen, PwC. Well, I worked at Coopers and Deloitte, so we've got a common background. How cool is that? I didn't realise I didn't read that in your bio. There you go. So you've written a book called The Professional, and we'd love to know a little bit more about the book. And we've got some great questions we're going to ask you about it, but also just why you chose this time to write that particular book.
Yes, well, thanks, Danette. And this time, it's actually taken me 7 years. And so I decided to write the book in the middle of 2018. As I say shamelessly about the author, the reason I started to write the book was to help me with my professional service masterclasses. I'm running professional service masterclasses for young and young at heart professionals, accountants and lawyers. And I thought I would hand out some pre-reading material. And then I thought, no, it'll be easier to write a book. It wasn't. It took me 7 years. And hopefully to be more profitable. Anyway, so the book started 7 years ago, well before COVID and well before ChatGPT. But I say in the introduction to the book, I say that there's happily because of these huge changes, the book became even more relevant. I say there are 4 main challenges facing professionals today and in the future: complexity in all its forms, increased client demands, remote work, and artificial intelligence. And Danette, I've created the ultimate playbook for professionals to navigate these challenges. And I start by asking 2 questions. How can I become my best possible professional? And how can I add the most value in the age of artificial intelligence? And so the book is in 2 parts. There's part 1 sets the scene, explains a bit about what it means to be professional, what clients want, what employers want and should do. And of course, I have a chapter called The Robots Are Coming, sort of. And then I launch into the playbook proper. And everyone's been astonished when I've shown them this. I'm a hard-bitten ex-tax lawyer, and I have a 5-factor model. It starts with self-care. How good is that? Self-care, motivation, learning, capabilities, and accelerants. And this is the book you need. And David Gonski, AC, wrote the foreword, and he said he wished this book had been around when he started his career 47 years ago.
I love that. And, you've got that strong background to really add value. And I love that you brought in the AI side of things as well, because I know a lot of professionals are actually struggling in that area because they're already busy. As you said, their clients are demanding more. So to be able to navigate that. And I love also in your model about that self-care, because without that, we run out of steam.
Yes.
So that's awesome. So let's start with my first question. And we deal with a lot of leaders across the globe. And I really like your thing about AI proofing people's leadership. So how can people actually AI proof their leadership?
Okay. We'll have 5 tips, Danette. The first one is leaders need to stay abreast of AI developments in their field of expertise. In other words, leaders need to embrace AI. But in all the manifestations of how it shows up in their work. Because if they're not aware of the best AI tools, and there's a lot of them out there now, it's not just ChatGPT. If leaders aren't aware of these tools, learning how to use them and investing in them and training their people, training the followers in how to use them, they're not going to have followers, because young people today realise that AI is a thing. I mean, Bill Gates, co-founder of Microsoft, said we live in the age of artificial intelligence, and it's true. So the first absolute thing leaders need to do is to invest in the tools, understand them, use them, and then train their people and make a point. It's a point of difference to get people in your organisation that we're using AI. The second thing I would say for leaders is to understand what their followers, their team members want and need from them as leaders. Leadership is a crazy thing. There's all sorts of theories over long periods of time, but it plays huge store in the work of the Gallup organisation. Gallup has been doing astonishing research for decades, and just a month or two ago, so Gallup have recently produced a report for the World Government Summit, but it's had a World Leadership Report, what followers want. If you're a leader without followers, you're just going for a walk. Yeah? So you need to know what your followers want. And of course it can vary, but Gallup said it's research over time. They do this every few years, over time and across countries. The four things that followers want from leaders are hope, trust, compassion, and stability. And this is based on vast evidence-based research and data points. So if you're a leader, if you don't get that you need to be giving hope, trust, compassion and stability to your followers, and AI is not going to change that. People want this even more as time goes on. So that's the second thing I would say, understand what your team members want. The third thing I would say to leaders is act with humility. And why humility? Well, I interviewed David Gonski, AC, in my AGSM course. I teach in the MBA, as I mentioned, and back in 2002, so before ChatGPT came out, I asked David for my class, what is the most important aspect of leadership? And without a pause, David Gonski said, the first thing a leader must have, an absolute must, is humility. And he went on to say he'd seen people destroyed, mainly men, he had to say, by lack of humility. Because if you lack humility, you don't understand, you're not listening to what other people are saying, you're not picking up messages. But critically, he said it's so easy to beat someone in negotiation. So if you're negotiating with a person who lacks humility, he said it's like not having a backhand. You can play to that side of the court every time. And of course, if you think about the person in the world at the moment who most lacks humility, Donald Trump, I mean, he's being played for a fool by the Chinese and everyone else. So when you lack humility, you're not picking up on other people's cues, and then you're going to mishandle negotiations. So, and AI is not going to change that. So the third thing is act with humility. Now the fourth thing leaders need to do to AI-proof their leadership is to invest in their emotional intelligence. Now emotional intelligence has been with us really since humans have been around. Even animals have emotional intelligence, but over the last 30 years there's been increasing evidence that, a lot of evidence-based research, that if you have emotional intelligence, it dramatically improves your leadership. You have a happier life, both privately and at work. You earn more money. There's nothing not to like about emotional intelligence. The fifth thing I would say about people proofing their leadership comes from Professor Scott Galloway. So Professor Scott Galloway at New York University, he's a bit of a rock star in psychology and the modern world. And so Professor Scott Galloway told CNBC, make it happen in March, so well over a year after the launch of ChatGPT. So Professor Galloway said, if I could give my 13 and 16-year-old one competence that I think would stand the test of time, it'd be storytelling. The type of storytelling may not matter because the platforms people use to communicate can rapidly change. But people love stories, and you have to make sure your stories are relevant, but leaders can inspire their teams by telling the right story at the right time. Artificial intelligence is not going to get too good at that anytime soon, the right story at the right time. So that was my last suggestion for leaders, become good storytellers.
Great advice, all of those five. Tony, I love this quote by Bill Nye, and it comes back to your point 3, where he says, everybody you know knows something you don't. And so that whole ability to be able to listen and that humility is actually such a great idea. So I loved all of your points. And I do a lot in the brain-based sort of science side. Right. They all have great evidence as well. So awesome. I love that. Yeah. So let's continue. Right. My next question is the essential skills that will make people irreplaceable, because obviously a lot of people are scared at the moment. Is my job going to get replaced because of things like AI? So what are those things that we need to double down on as humans?
What I'd say to that, Danette, is there's no simple Acme one-off list. Yep. And you can read any number of business magazines and World Economic Forum lists and Harvard Business Review articles saying you need these 5 things. to make sure that you are irreplaceable. That's it's too broad. You need to get more granular. It depends on you and your role. So the skills it's not skills that people need to make them irreplaceable. It's a skill that you, Danette, it's me, Tony. What are you doing in your current life and role? And so in my book, it's about professionals, but of course I define professionals pretty broadly. As essentially a professional is someone who's got a client somewhere. So that could be people, and I know we'll come back to working in-house. The world's full of professionals, not just lawyers and accountants. There's engineers and software designers. And you can be working in a professional service firm, or you can work in-house. And if you're in-house, you still have clients. So my model in my book, which I'm very proud of, it looks at both capabilities and it looks at tasks. And I'll start with tasks. And I have a notion of a human task. And a human task is a task that at any given moment, your clients value humans doing, either in total or with some expert supervision of one or more machines. And so what I'm saying is not new, but increasingly since ChatGPT came out 2.5 years ago, people have been realising that no one in their right mind who's going to make an important decision, for example, is going to trust a machine to advise it on legal issues or dental issues or any issues you want a human expert to supervise a machine. And so expert supervision means supervision requiring substantial human domain-specific knowledge, experience, expertise, judgment, and wisdom. And so your task as a professional today is to figure out what of your clients' needs and tasks, which are human tasks and which are machine tasks. And machine tasks are basically things where the client really wants the machine to do it without any particular human expertise involved. And if you're in some compliance role somewhere where basically the clients don't seem to care about your human judgment, expertise, wisdom and experience, you have a problem. But most professionals today can probably, with a bit of thought, and you talk to the clients, you ask the clients what they're valuing, and you can pretty much find human tasks. And that will make you irreplaceable. And of course, your goal then is to make sure you develop the capabilities. So one example, and in my book, I talk about Mary. Mary is an in-house lawyer working in a major corporation, and Mary, it's a made-up example, Mary works out her prime capabilities in human tasks and discovers, unsurprisingly, speaking to her internal clients, they value her business, they value her legal skills, they value her business acumen, they want her to be able to negotiate well, and they want her to meet deadlines. And their capabilities Mary can develop, and they're all human tasks. I mean, if Mary misses deadlines, they're going to sack her and not the machine. She needs to be able to negotiate, and at this stage, machines, it's going to be a long time before machines can negotiate. So what Mary needs to do is to figure out what are her key human capabilities and tasks, which will enable her to stand out and should be irreplaceable by machines any decade soon.
Love that. Yeah, and I love your model and just getting people to even talk to their clients, because some people don't necessarily like to do that, whether they work in-house or outside. And it's like one of those skills that's like, you need to communicate, you need to ask those questions, because guessing doesn't always give a good answer. So I love that. So my next one is how to discover what clients of professionals want now and will want in the future. So obviously asking them about what they want now. I would imagine that some clients struggle with what they want in the future. So how could we help them?
Well, maybe just talk about the present before we go to the future, if that's okay, Danette, because as I say in my book, it's astonishing how many professionals find reasons not to ask their clients what they really want. Yep. I worked at Pricewaterhouse 40 years ago, and I've been working in professional service firms and coaching and mentoring them for a long time now. And the bigger, more sophisticated ones get it. Yeah. And so you need to go and ask the clients. Ideally, you send actual professionals, not just business development people. And sometimes, of course, what you do is you don't send the partner. If you have a big client, you send a professional, like a senior partner, or and of course the senior partner can take a junior professional or a business development person with them. But sometimes you want independence. You want the client to know, and of course for very important clients, you send the chief the chief executive partner, managing partner, and so there's a bit of independence. And the clients pretty much love this, as long as you don't over-engineer it. Sometimes people send, if you let business development people involved, they'll prepare a 10-page questionnaire. So it's all about the conversation. It's all about relationships, asking about relationships and how we're going, being humble about this. So many firms still don't get it. So that's what you should be doing now. In the book, I talk about what clients want in the future, and I say at the basic level, it's the same as what they've always wanted. They want you to respect them, they want you to be reliable, they want you to deliver value for money. But there's certainly three main trends, which already, clients may not be able to articulate this, but it's pretty clear. The first trend for the future is the relentless pressure on downward costs will continue. So one of the things about companies, particularly ones that have in-house professionals, that they now know some of the black box, some of the secrets of how professional service firms work, and there'll be this ongoing pressure coming from the procurement teams of big corporations, aided and abetted by the in-house professionals who understand how the world works. The second theme in the future will definitely be artificial intelligence, and these things are all interlinked. Yep. So the second theme is clients will definitely want you to be using artificial intelligence to replace human labour where possible. They'll still value your expert wisdom and judgment, but they'll want you to use AI as much as possible to drive down costs. And it's astonishing, some of the things that have been happening in the last 2.5 years. OpenAI, which created ChatGPT, has created Harvey AI, which is a legal platform for artificial intelligence used by lawyers, and Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis have done the same thing. There's many others. So profession-specific AI tools are out there, they're being used. You have to use them to reduce costs. And the third trend, which is happening now and will happen in the future, is disaggregation. So clients will increasingly work out there's a task which doesn't need all to be done by one firm in one country. And for example, some big complicated cross-border legal function, maybe they're going to get some low-cost provider in Ireland or somewhere in Asia to do some part of due diligence. Another firm will do another aspect, and then there'll be some high-end work done by the guy down the road. So, and different companies may be doing different bits of an overall assignment. So that'll get more complicated. And so in summary, the three trends which most clients will probably be asking for is reduced costs, use of AI, and disaggregating tasks where they can.
And with that last one, it comes back to your point earlier about building those relationships. So if I'm now working with people across different countries, different time zones, etc., I would imagine those, like the EQ, the people skills, are going to make that smoother, rather than if you don't have them, it becomes very transactional and maybe not long-term sustainable.
Yes, exactly. There's no doubt machines are getting better and quicker and faster. Humans have to do the things that humans do best, which is relationship building and then enhancing, maintaining relationships and communicating well. And of course, Danette, listening, as we said earlier. So listening is the core skill of coaches in coaching, and it's a core skill of most professionals. If you're not listening and asking good questions, you won't be in the game in the future.
Great advice. Love that, Tony. So then we talked about in-house and external professionals. So I would imagine that there is some different strategies for the success if you're an in-house professional versus an external. So any pro tips you'd have for both of those?
Sure. I've got 5 tips for people working in-house. The first one is, of course, people can go in-house either from the get-go. The tax office, for example, employs many graduates, and big banks employ many graduates. So people can either go in-house from the start of their career or move laterally later on. Many lawyers work out cleverly the right law firms. Not everyone's going to be a partner. Not everyone wants to be a partner. And people typically move once they've been a senior associate for 2 or 3 years. So when you've got about 7 years post-qualification experience, it's clear you have not been passed over for partner yet. So it's not obvious whether you've been passed over for partner. You know a lot, you're a workhorse, and so there's a sweet spot there at about the 7-year mark for lawyers. Anyway, so you can start in-house at the start of your career or move later on. But the first thing to note is you want to make sure the organisation you're going to work for in-house, as far as you can tell, seems to respect and value in-house professionals. Because there's plenty of, I've seen many, I know many companies, I'm not going to name them, there's many organisations that quite frankly don't value their internal professionals, and you don't want to work there. How do you find out? Well, you ask people who work there, you check out your network, find out people who used to work there, look on Glassdoor, find out, does this place seem to respect in-house professionals? The second and related point is to ensure that your values and your risk tolerance seem to align with the organisation. Many professionals, quite rightly, will be fairly conservative in how they in their values and their risks, and if they join some Wild West outfit that expects them to be giving at-the-edge advice, or which otherwise conflicts with their values, then that's a no-no. So that's, once again, you need to ask around before you join. The third thing I would say is that internal professionals need to treat their internal clients the same way that professionals do in professional service firms. I spent 5 years at Westpac, and I'd been at Pricewaterhouse for 5 years, and I went to Westpac, and it was natural for me to treat when I was at Westpac, it was natural for me to treat my internal clients the same way that I did when I was working at Pricewaterhouse. In other words, with courtesy, respect, promptness. So some in-house professionals don't get that, and they're not going to last very long. Your internal business clients want to be treated with the same respect as if you're an external professional. The fourth point, I struggled with this at Westpac, is to write clearly and in plain English. And so I've been at Pricewaterhouse for 5 years, and I could write these long and turgid opinions, which more or less seem to get through the partner and off the client. But once I arrived at Westpac, I was very quickly informed, Tony, we want a simple, clear solution. You can have your sort of all your bumps somewhere else, but we need simple, clear writing which addresses the deliverable we want. So the first thing an internal professional needs to do is ask, well, what do you want? What do you need from me here? Is it options, recommendations, course of action, and then produce clear and simple written English. And the fifth point I would say for in-house professionals is be aware that your career progression, either in the internal department or elsewhere in the organisation, may be limited. Yeah? So let's say you join the legal department of some reasonable sized corporation with 15 or 20 in-house lawyers, and they have a long-standing young general counsel who could be there for another 20 years, and they don't have a tradition of somehow making room for you to move out of legal into the business. Well, you're sort of stuck, yeah? And so be aware that even if the place needs to be good and trains you well and it's got good values, you may need to move around a little bit over your course of in-house professionalism as compared to many people in professional service centres. The good ones can stay and become part and have a happy life. It's not always as easy to make the top of the pile in an in-house role, so you may need to move around a bit.
Great advice. Love that. Excellent. So then my next one, because we're sort of coming to the end, but we love to ask our authors about their writing process. So, you said it took you 7 years. How did you start with an idea or whatever through to actually completion?
So it started, I remember it distinctly. I was on a plane coming back from Boston in 2018. My wife, I was leaving my first career in the middle of 2018. I decided to go to Harvard and do an executive education course. And I realised at the course, I thought, I'm a bit arrogant and I sort of lack humility. Danette, in my book, I talk about the importance of humility, but I say, do as I say, not as I do. And so I did this course at Harvard Business School, and I thought, I can teach that. And so I thought, I can do this. And so that's when I decided I would come up with professional service masterclasses, and then I'd write the book. And so I told my poor wife came with me on this trip. And on the way back from Boston, it's a long trip, and she had to just endure hours. I wrote out the contents page for the book. I explained to my wife at great length. She was asleep within minutes. Anyway, of course, the book changed enormously over the 7 years. But I'd pick it up and put it down. I went back to university. I never have writer's block. I have so much material. And being an ex-tax lawyer, I say and write way too many words. And so the book was a bit like magic pudding. I would think of an idea and I'd just sit down. Every now and again I'd sit down and write a chapter. And the book was so long, I eventually realised I had to take stuff out. And some of the stuff I've put, and so I'm going to promote my website now, on the Tony Frost, the Frost Leadership Consulting website. I've got 4 or 5 chunky things which are not in the book, but are very useful for professionals. I've got a chapter on starting and changing jobs. I've got a chapter on performance reviews and pay rises, another chapter on remote work, which covers in more detail than I had room for in the book. I've got an insight on my website for more senior professionals about how to go about contesting and winning roles in leadership positions in firms. Anyway, so that stuff I thought, I'm just give away for free on my website. And then so much other stuff, I have enough material for a second book. And so I'm not going to write a second book anytime soon, but there's a whole lot more detailed stuff I can talk about on specific skills. This first book is very high level, and it's the overarching framework. And I'll have enough material left over for a very useful second book down the track. So in summary, writing was never a problem, never had writer's block. I just pick up basically I wrote the book in between doing other things. And so because I had so much going on in my life, it's taken 7 years rather than 7 months.
I love that. And, you worked it around your life, which is awesome. So, and I bet there are some people out there that have had an idea years ago, which now you've just given them some hope. So I love that, Tony. So my last question is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners and our viewers around today's topic and your book? Or indeed, we love to hear, obviously your website, social media, where people can find you, etc. So over to you, Tony.
Okay, well, first of all, I'll shamelessly promote myself. Frost Consulting, so you can my website. So yes, so frostleadership.com.au, and there you can find about my services, my masterclasses. There's a link to my book, and I'm happy to say you can get chapter 2 for free. Chapter 2 is tantalising. It talks about robots coming, and that's where I've got a summary of the AI environment today, or at least 2 months ago when the book went to print. So it's changing every day. And I am on LinkedIn, so if you go to Tony Frost on LinkedIn, so I don't do Twitter or Facebook and stuff. But I'd also like to share something else. And so a book has just turned up for me. It's called Irreplaceable, and it was written by Pascal Bornet. It's Irreplaceable, The Art of Standing Out in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. It's also published by Wiley, so he's a fellow Wiley author. And I haven't read it yet, but I read the reviews, and it seems like an awesome book. So, it covers some of the things I'm doing, but my book is broader and covers a whole lot of other things. This is a more narrow book, but I was fascinated, Danette, when you sent me the questions for today that included the question, what essential skills that make people irreplaceable? And then I thought, I've just bought a book, and it's actually called Irreplaceable. And so I suspect it, of course, buy and read my book first, and then if you need more information, then buy Irreplaceable by Pascal Bornet, B-O-R-N-E-T.
I love that, and I love that you promoted someone else as well. And Jez will have to reach out to get him on our podcast as well, because we always love new books and new authors. So Tony, this has been an awesome interview, and I reckon we're going to get you back at some stage in the future, because we love to have conversations sort of about what's going on in the marketplace and stuff. And I suspect with what you're doing, you're going to have your finger on the pulse of all the changes that are starting to come up. So we'd love to have you back at some stage. Thank you so much. And I'll just say to all of our listeners and viewers, we wish you a magical week.